Well, hello everybody, and welcome once again to another episode. And it's Christmas, so I hope everybody's having a really nice break. I hope you're getting lots of chill time. Happy Christmas to everybody, and I also hope you're out there getting some photography done as well. So this episode, well, we're going to have a bit of an end of year roundup type episode today, where I'm going to look at some of the nicest lenses, cameras, camera and lens combinations, some of the nicest kit that I've bought and reviewed during the past year. And we're going to begin with, what are we going to begin with? We're going to begin with this lens here right in front of me. It's the Meyer Optic Gorlitz f1.8 50mm, and this is a great little lens. Meyer Optic, of course, are a German company, very old German optical company, and they have a very long history going back to 1800 and something. This was their 50mm f1.8 lens, and it's a really great little lens. It's an interesting lens as well because it was the model or the progenitor for what eventually became the Pentacon Practicar 1.8 50. Now, these are essentially the same lens. You can see there's been some bodily changes over the years. There is certainly some plastic in this lens here. This is a very late lens, I think maybe an early 90s or late 80s lens thereabouts. There is some talk, some people do say that the quality became less over the years. Well, you could say maybe that a plastic focus ring is a drop in quality, and perhaps it is. But certainly the quality of the images doesn't seem too different. And in fact, looking at the coating on these lenses, the one on the Practicar lens, coating on the Practicar lens, actually seems that little bit more vivid, that little bit more intense. So it may be that the coatings actually got better over the years. But, you know, they're both nice lenses anyway. This one, I guess the advantage is that it's all metal and it's the original. It shoots very nicely. It has a nice blur, like a lot. In fact, like almost all vintage lenses, it's not that sharp if you shoot it wide open. It's not particularly soft, but it's not bitingly sharp as some other lenses, modern lenses, are when you shoot them wide open. So if you want very sharp results, you can knock it down to f2 or f2.8, but you don't need to go any further, and you'll still get some nice blur, some nice separation at that aperture setting. Aperture blades, well, this lens has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blades, and the Practicar, the later lens, also has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blades. So not a lens over endowed with aperture blades, but certainly I've had no problem with 6 blades. You still get some nice blur from them. Blur can be a little harsh wide open in certain situations, but it can also be beautiful in other situations as well. So this is a really nice little lens. It's a great lens if you're new to vintage lenses and you're looking around for a nice cheap way in to test the waters. This could well be it. A great little lens. They're available in M42 mount. Most of them, in fact, are in M42 mount. This one's in Exacta mount, and the Exacta lenses tend to be a little bit cheaper, which is why I bought this one. What can you expect to pay? Well, for a good one, you can expect to pay between £30 to £50 or thereabouts, I would imagine. As I say, Exacta versions tend to be towards the lower end. Patience, as always, pays off, and with patience you may well get one of these lenses cheaper than that. A great little starter lens, or a nice little lens to add to any vintage lens collection. Well recommended. Next, where are we going next? Well, the next lens we're going to look at is this one. Actually, this is a really nice lens, and this is the Yashica ML 50mm f1.4, and I think I bought this over the summer sometime actually, and I really enjoyed shooting it. This lens was made at a time when Yashica and Contax had a tie-up, and I believe, alright, so I've read anyway, this lens benefited from some of the Zeiss technology. I'm not sure whether they use the Zeiss coatings. I don't know. I'm not sure to what extent the Zeiss technology actually transferred over, but I know there was a tie-up, a fairly short-lived tie-up, but there was a tie-up at that time. It shoots really nicely, and I think its greatest strength is what it does with colour. It really is quite something for colour, and it makes colours like, well, there's really no other vintage 1.4 I've used that can match it. The Zuiko colours are nice for sure, the Olympus Zuiko colours, nicely saturated, just how I like them. But this one, I don't know, the colours are just that bit nicer, they're just that bit fuller, there's just that bit more difference and sense of heightenedness in the tones. They're just lovely. They've got plenty of saturation, they've got plenty of depth, plenty of body, and just really, really nice colours. I'd put them on a par with Minolta colours. That's how nice the colours from this lens are. And I think that's its main advantage. If you want a lens, a vintage lens that shoots colours really, really well, this should be on your list. It's not the sharpest wide open, it's not soft wide open, it's certainly no worse than, for example, the Zuiko 1.4 or the Nikon AI 1.4. The Canon FD, or the new FD anyway, will probably beat it wide open for sharpness, but the FD, I think, is a slightly more modern lens, and it doesn't quite have the vintage aspect that some of the other lenses from that time do. Aperture blades, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so you should get plenty of nice round bokeh balls, or roundish anyway, and I certainly didn't have a problem with that. It gives very nice blur, very soft, very lovely, one or two harsh spots here and there, but nothing to certainly nothing to worry about, and doesn't happen too often. I think the best way to shoot this lens is maybe stop down a little bit to f2 or maybe 2.8, and then it turns into a real blazing sharp monster with those lovely, lovely colours. In terms of cost, a good one of these will cost you around about £70 to £80 or thereabouts, but it's good value at that price. And don't forget, if you do buy a vintage lens, they're not making them anymore. They're not going to go down in price. They're only going to increase in price from now on, or stay the same. Either way, you're unlikely to lose out. If you dip a toe into the waters and think, well, this lens isn't for me, it's not going to be difficult to sell again. So anyway, a very nice little lens from Yashica. And next on the list is, well, a real underdog of a lens, and that's partly why, some of the reason, alright, a lot of the reason I like this lens. This is the Nikon Zoom Nikkor 43 to 86 millimeters 1 to 3.5. So this is a constant aperture, f3.5, 43 to 86 millimeter zoom lens, and I think that's got to be the weirdest range of focal lengths I've ever seen. That must have been done out of necessity because it really doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? This lens is widely regarded to be Nikon's worst ever lens, so it's a true underdog. There were 3 versions of it. This is the second version, and it's the first version that is derided as being the worst. This one, the second one, and the third one, which I haven't tried, are both said to be nicer. I can't comment which is nicer than which, but I can say that this is a very nice little zoom lens. It's an unpretentious lens for sure. It's not a fancy lens for sure, but I like the images it makes. It's got beautiful, delicate colours. It's got that Nikon signature colour palette. It makes lovely blur. It's plenty sharp enough, and it's got a constant aperture. So I'd say what's not to like about this lens? Don't believe the hype, and always remember, it is not the kit that makes the image. It's the photographer that makes the image. It doesn't matter what gear you give to a photographer who has learned to see. If you've learned to see, if you've practiced this art, you can pick up any old camera. You can pick up, I don't know, a plastic throwaway disposable camera or a child's camera and make a good image. It's not the equipment that makes the image, it's the photographer that does. And with this lens you can make some really nice images. I like it because it's an underdog, but I also like it because it's a jolly good lens, and I think it's a really good introduction to Nikon lenses actually, and a really good introduction to vintage lenses as well. It's not expensive. A good one will cost you roughly £40 or so. A very nice lens, again, one of my recommendations. Okay, so the Odyssey continues. The next lens I'm going to talk about is this beautiful little collapsible lens from KMZ in Russia. This is the Underdog 22. Now, there were a lot of Russian collapsible lenses, beginning with the Fed 10 in the 1930s, which was supplied with the original Fed cameras, the original 30s Fed 1. That continued to be made after the war with coating rather than uncoated as it had been pre-war, and it eventually morphed into this lens, the Underdog 22, which itself eventually morphed into the Underdog 50, but this is the 22 and it's a beautiful little collapsible. I love these collapsible lenses. I'll tell you why. A, they're so tiny. If you put them onto a Fed 1, a Zorky 1 like this, they look so cool. If I can just get the lens onto the camera, they just look really, really cool on one of these little cameras. A Fed 1, a Zorky 1, one of the Barnack Leicas, even on the later Russian rangefinders which will accept these L39 lenses. These look fantastic. If you put these on a digital camera, they'll also look really fantastic. Don't ever collapse them though on a digital camera, because the back of the tube will in all probability hit your sensor and cause damage, chaos and tears, and that would be awful. So never collapse it on a digital shall I try again? Never collapse it on a digital camera, because you will cause damage. But on a film camera, no problem at all. So they're very tiny lenses. They're also very sharp lenses. This is a Tessar lens, which is a very simple configuration of elements, but a very efficient configuration of elements. It's very sharp. There's not a great deal of blur, but there is enough to give separation from your subject. After all, how much blur do we really want? It's very light and it's very beautiful. Look at this beautiful little thing from the age of mechanism and engineering and mechanical things. It's just so lovely. They're also really, really easy to service. The focusing helix is right on the back there. You can get the rear element out easily. You get the front element out easily. Very easy to service. Great looking lens and a great shooting lens as well. As regards price, well, as always, patience pays off. I recently bought one of these lenses. In fact, this very lens on a Zorki 1 camera, and I paid £40 for the camera and the lens. The lenses themselves are often advertised at between £50 to £70, and that's a reasonable price, but they can be found cheaper with patience. A beautiful little bit of kit. One of my favourite lenses, and again, one that I can highly recommend. So next one on my list is the TT Artisans lens, the 50, not the 50mm, what are you talking about, Nigel? It's a 17mm f1.4, and I really like this little lens. This is an APS-C lens. It's for APS-C sensor cameras. So, you know, Sony a6000, Fuji XT series, some of the Canon M cameras. This one is for Fuji, and I really enjoyed using it on my XT2, and I took it all over the place actually. I liked it so much. It was stuck on the front of my camera for about a month, and I took many more pictures than usual while I was reviewing it because it's really just such a nice lens. The equivalent, full frame equivalent focal length of this 17mm lens on an APS-C sensor is about 23-24mm, so it's a good wide shot. Gives you a very nice wide shot. It's not a super wide, but it is a good broad wide lens. It has a little distortion in it, but not too much distortion, and generally lines stay nice and straight unless you're very, very close at the minimum focus distance, which is pretty close, of 20 centimeters. It's all very nicely made in metal. Everything turns very nicely and smoothly, and that nice wide aperture means there is plenty of blur there available if you want it. And because this is a modern lens, a new lens, it means that if you shoot wide open, you're gonna get a nice sharp shot, and this is a very sharp lens indeed. I shot it wide open all the time unless I was zone focusing on the street, which I did do with it, and you can do nice and easily with this lens. It's a clicky aperture. It's also a very small and tiny aperture, and I can't see exactly how many blades there are. It looks like 6, but I can't tell exactly. There may be more. It's probably either 6 or 8. It's very difficult to tell, actually. There may even be more than 8. I may be leading you astray. But anyway, plenty of aperture blades in there somewhere. It's a lovely little lens, and I really enjoyed shooting it. It's a bit of an odd shape. It's got this sort of taper towards the front, and the lens cap that's supplied with it is a screw-on lens cap, which is not my favourite. I'd much prefer the push-on variety. Much easier to use in my view when you want to get them off quick. A great little lens though, available now, and if you want a really nice wide for your APS-C sensor camera, you won't find a much nicer one than this one. These really are one of the nicest wides in my experience for APS-C that you can buy right now. TT Artisans 17mm f1.4. Lovely little lens. Next on the list is definitely an Underdog. Where is it? So much of an Underdog I can't even find it. Here it is. It's the Domiplan, the Meyer Optic Domiplan. Now, this is a really, really simple lens. I think this is an M42 version. Yeah, it's an M42 screw mount. Most of them were M42. Lenses don't get much simpler than this one, and this lens gets a lot of flack for being a very simple Cooke triplet lens. There are 3 elements in this lens, that's all. The Cooke design is a very old design, so technically this is not an up-to-date lens. This is by no means at the cutting edge of optical technology. In fact, on paper, it is very much towards the other end of the blunt edge of optical technology. But I've got a soft spot for it because it's an Underdog. Not only because of that, actually, but because I like the images it makes, despite its flaws. Remember that while we can be a bit, highfalutin about which lens is better than which. Oh, hello, Zorky. Zorky's having a scratch here. Do you want to join us? Come and join us, Zorky. Come on. Come on, mate. Come and join us. Come on. He doesn't want to join us. Never mind. So, while we can get highfalutin and a little bit that way about which lens is better than which, and which is sharpest and which is best and all the rest of it, we should remember that technical specifications are only one part of the story. The real story is, what kind of image does the lens make? What is the aesthetic effect of the images that the lens makes? And I like the aesthetic effect that these images have, not in spite of, but because of the optical flaws that this lens has. I like the bokeh from it, I like the blur, I like the colours, I like the fact that it's a nice small lens, I like the fact that it's a very simple lens, and I do like the images. It's not particularly sharp, but stop it down and you'll get more sharpness. The colours I really liked. The blur I really liked. It's a bubbly lens. It'll give you lots of bubbles, soap bubbles and circles and lots of crazy wild stuff going on. It's not very well controlled. It's not very well calculated. It's a very old design that makes some really weird, kooky, wonderful, awful effects. And those 2 words, wonderful and awful, what we're looking for is the aesthetic effect we want, and this lens will give you that by the shovelful. I really like this lens. It's very, very cheap to buy, and it's worth buying. It's worth playing with, just to experiment with, just to play around and just to see what you can do with a very, very simple, cheap bit of kit. What your artistic vision, what your creative vision, what your photographic vision can do with very, very simple kit. And as you develop your skills, you will find that you will be able to get good shots out of any old lens, and this lens is a great lens for improving those skills on. Remember, it's the photographer that makes the image, not the gear. The gear is used to its own advantage. Specific lenses used for specific purposes. This lens, although many write it off, has a specific purpose in my book. Try it, you might like it. I certainly did. Okay, so cameras that I've really enjoyed using this year. Some of my favourite cameras that I've looked at this year. Well, the one I'm going to begin with, I don't actually have anymore. I sold it on. It's the Fujifilm X-E2. Now, that camera I absolutely loved. I've looked at the X Pro 1. I enjoyed using that, but I was a little bit unsure about the optical / electronic viewfinder arrangement. But a beautiful camera, made some beautiful images. I looked at the XE one, which has the same chip as the X Pro one. Again, a beautiful little camera. But I didn't get on with the focus peaking on either of those cameras. There's only one colour and I really didn't find it too easy to use. It's not that distinct and it's not that clear. So I didn't find those ideal for use with vintage lenses. For me, the one where it all came together was the XE2, and there's so many factors going into that little camera that make it a really, really wonderful bit of kit. Those are the sensor, same sensor as the X-T1, Fujifilm X-T1, a very, very beautiful sensor, makes some beautiful images. One of Fujifilm's nicest sensors, in my opinion. Much improved focus peaking with different colours, so now it's easy to use vintage lenses on the XE2, whereas with the XE1 and the X Pro one it wasn't particularly easy because of that peaking problem. So I think the XE2 for me is the camera where it all came together. I just found it to be so easy to use, and it felt like a natural successor to the cameras like the Olympus Trip, for example, the small film cameras that were sold in the 1970s, the point and shoots, the higher end of the point and shoot market. It kind of reminded me of that tradition, although of course it's not a point and shoot camera. I love the viewfinder being at the side. I really like that. I love the small size of the camera. I love the shape, the feel, the sort of rangefinder in quotation marks designs, although of course it doesn't have a rangefinder. That was one of the nicest cameras that I've used this year. An absolutely beautiful little piece of kit, and they are available. They are real bargains at the moment. They are available for around about £200 to £250 body only. Get one of those with low mileage on it, small shutter count, and you've got a beautiful camera, mirrorless camera that's going to last you a long, long time. It's not the latest thing, but then again, we don't really need the latest thing. It's a camera that makes beautiful images, and it's beautifully made too. Very, very highly recommended, and one of the cameras I've enjoyed using the most over the past year. Another camera that I really enjoyed using, that has a story to it, is this little one. It's got all tangled up. This is the Fujifilm. What are you saying, Nigel? This is the Olympus OMD EM10. I'm pretty sure it's in it. Yeah, it says it on there. It's got a very long name, this camera. It's one of the cameras with one of the longest names in the world. This is a lovely, lovely little camera. Look how small this thing is. It just fits beautifully into your hand. It's got all the controls you need. It's got a couple of control wheels there. It's got an MSAP dial over here with all the adjustments on it. It's a tiny, tiny little camera, and for me, small size is really a big factor in what makes me warm to a camera. And these little Olympuses, just beautiful. Really tiny, really fit into the hand nicely, and they're even smaller than these old Leicas, which were pretty small anyway. You can see that's even smaller. That's a tiny camera. A 16 megapixel sensor, which really is more than enough for anybody. I really can't see anyone would need very much more than that. A beautiful little camera. I didn't quite get on with the focus peaking because it goes away when you push the button, or rather you have to push the button to make it appear. You've got to push this function button on top here to make the peaking appear, and I didn't really get on with that system, but no camera is perfect. This makes images with beautiful colours. Olympus always had brilliant colour science, and it's carried through to this camera. Absolutely lovely colours on this camera. But sadly, this camera failed, and you know, I'm usually really lucky with the digital cameras I buy to review on here, and I then sell them on. This one I bought, I paid £100 for it, and it broke, and I don't know if anybody can advise me about what's wrong with it, whether it's died, whether it can be repaired, I don't know. But when it switches on, we get the screen, and then we get, very shortly, we're going to get black screen. I think the shutter's stuck. I think from what I've read, the shutters can get stuck on these cameras. If anyone knows how to fix them up, let me know in the comments box, and we'll maybe do a fixing episode on this one, see if we can get it up and running, or even up and crawling. At the moment it's doing nothing, but I've been unlucky with it. Digital cameras are not usually unreliable like this, and it is a beautiful little camera. Also, so are the EM5, the EM1, and all of the rest of the EM cameras, so I hear, so I've read, give the same beautiful colours, have the same beautiful handling, and resolution is higher in the later ones as well. So if you like micro four thirds sensors, I love micro four thirds. I think it's a great little system. This is one that should definitely be on your list. It's also pretty cheap. I bought this one for £100, so they're not expensive cameras. Buy one, enjoy it. A lovely little piece of kit. Finally today, let's have a look at some camera and lens combinations that I've enjoyed, most enjoyed from the past year. And I'm going to begin with this combination. This is the Fujifilm X-T2, and I bought this camera to review in round about January, February time last year. I liked it so much I kept it, and it does beautiful video, it does absolutely beautiful images. It's a beautifully made camera. It's got a magnesium weather sealed body. I liked it so much I just couldn't part with it. And paired with this Jupiter 8, I was out shooting this yesterday. Actually, it's rather chilly weather here at the moment, and it was a beautiful frosty morning. And they just seem to work together nicely. It's a great looking combination, actually, and while I was out yesterday, two guys talked to me about it, stopped me and talked to me about it. So it's certainly a conversation starter. This lens just seems to work beautifully on this camera. This is my favourite Jupiter 8. I've got a few Jupiter 8s. This one's from 1967, I think, and it came to me in a very bad state. And I had to lubricate the focus mechanism, which is still nice and lubricated, but I discovered yesterday the aperture mechanism has tightened up. That needs a bit of lubrication, and it didn't work at all well in the cold, so I'll have to look at that. But yeah, this is my favourite Jupiter, and I found this is one that just gives a most beautiful image. But they're all lovely, you know. My 1955 version is lovely, my 1978 version is lovely. All my Jupiters are nice. Some people say there was big variation with these lenses, but I've not found that to be the case, and I've used, 20 or 30 of them over the years. I just haven't found that to be the case. This one is subtly the nicest of all of mine, but only fractionally, only marginally, only subtly, and you're going to be okay with pretty much any Jupiter 8 that you buy. They're lovely, lovely lenses based on the 1930s Zeiss Sonar design, so you get some beautiful bokeh and blur from them, and it just works perfectly with the X-T2. This is one of my favourite X-T cameras. I've used it and used it and used it. I've reviewed lenses on it. I've done my own personal work on it, and I've just taken it out for pleasure as well, like I did yesterday. A lovely combination. The cameras go for around £400. A good X-T2, a good Jupiter 8. Again, asking prices differ from selling prices. You can find good ones of these for £20 to £30 if you're lucky, or if you go with the first seller, you find maybe from £40 to £60 or thereabouts. But even if you pay a little over the odds for one, they're still really nice lenses and very, very highly recommended by me. The next camera we're going to look at is this one. This is one that I've really enjoyed shooting. I haven't shot it that much. I bought it, when did I buy it? It must have been right at the beginning of the year, and I don't think I've really used this one actually so far, but I have, that is in episodes, but I've shot it occasionally and I've really liked it. It's a great camera to use. It's a Leica thread mount. It's based on the Leica design, but it's an interesting evolution of that design. Just look at this thing. Is it not a beautiful machine? It's got the winding knob here just right where you want it, shutter button right where you need it. It makes that lovely shutter sound that these mechanical cameras make. The Fed cameras I've found were always that bit more refined than their Zorky counterparts, at least than the later Zorky cameras, and they do work with a beautiful mechanical precision. Shutter speed selector on the top, of course, like all Russian rangefinders, never change the shutter speed before winding on. Otherwise you'll break the camera, or you might break the camera, and tears and chaos will result. It's got a little diopter mechanism, look, a diopter adjuster on the back there. It's got all the mod cons you could possibly want. Well, all the mod cons for 1955 anyway. It's even got a self-timer so you can do rangefinder selfies. It's got a lovely lens, the Industar 26. This is a Tessar design, the predecessor of the Industar 61. A lovely lens, but it does need to be used with a hood. Make sure you put a hood on here because it will catch stray light really, really easily and you'll lose contrast. But a lovely little combination and a very, very stylish looking camera. Look at that. The Zorky 3 is pretty stylish looking, and probably a bit more stylish looking than this one, but the Fed 3 certainly gives it a run for its money. Lovely little bit of kit. Maybe the best thing about it is the price. You can buy one of these cameras for £30 to £40 with a lens, and you can be ready to do some 30s style rangefinder photography, which I do often like to go back to because that's kind of where it all began all those years ago, and it's also where it all began for me because I learned photography on a rangefinder, a Fed 4 rangefinder camera. Nice little bit of kit. Try one if you get the chance. Okay, the next camera and lens combination I'm going to talk about is, well, I can show you the lens. I think I can anyway, and it's here. It's the Konica 40mm, and the camera you're looking through now, it's the Sony A7 that I'm using to record this episode on. But put these two together, put the Sony A7 and this lens together, and something magical happens. This lens, if you want a lens that will open up the street for you, if you're into street photography at all and you want a lens that will do that, I would suggest this lens is it. It's beautifully made. It has an f1.8 aperture. It's got Konica colours which are like no other colours. They are unique. They are absolutely unique. This lens will, I was going to say it will turn you into a better photographer. When I put this camera on, this lens on the front of my camera, the front of my A7, there's a magical transformation happens, and it feels like I become a better photographer. Anyway, I'll put it that way. And you certainly have to get close to your subject using one of these lenses if you want to do portraits. So it'll certainly teach you how to do that. It'll help you to master your craft as a street photographer, because you have to get in there. So you will find your own way to do that, just as I did. In fact, I'm still practicing that, but this lens, this 40mm lens, has helped me do that. And I don't know, it just seems to be able to find subjects on the street. It can see subjects on the street differently to any other lens, and it shoots them differently to any other lens as well. It's sharp, wide open. I never bothered stopping it down because it's sharp enough to use wide open. The camera, the Sony A7, is still one of my all-time favourite digital cameras. It's really small, it's really portable, and it's got that beautiful big full-frame sensor. It was a technological triumph in its day, and for me it still is a technological triumph. And paired together, this lens and that camera are a winning combination. Alright, finally, number 12, another camera and lens combination that I think really worked well were the Fujifilm X-T10 and the Carl Zeiss Jena Pankolar 1.8 50mm. So that just seemed to be a combination that worked, and it seemed to be a combination that worked more in classic chrome, the classic chrome film simulation, than it did in any other way on that camera. I just had a ball with that camera and lens combination. Sometimes when you put cameras and lenses together, something happens, and it did when I put those two together. It's an APS-C sensor, so the CZJ Pankolar gives a equivalent focal length of about 75mm. So that means you've got a bit of reach, which I do like in a lens. I do like the focal length, the range of focal lengths from around about 75 to 90mm. It just gives me that bit more reach over a 50. Just allows me to get in there and to see candid stuff of what's going on around without being too obtrusive or indeed intrusive. The X-T10 was my first Fujifilm camera, and it began my interest in Fujifilm cameras, and it's a beautiful little camera to buy today. It's got the same sensor as the X-T1. It's cheaper than the X-T1. You can get a nice body for around about 150, 175 pounds. The Carl Zeiss Jena Pankolar is one of my all-time favourites. Vintage lenses. It's the sharpest vintage 50 I've ever shot wide open, bar none, bar Western Zeiss's of the period. It's a unique, outstanding lens with a unique, outstanding colour signature, and it just seems to suit classic chrome and this sensor really well, and I made some beautiful images with it, or what I thought were nice images anyway. A good Pankolar will cost you, they're not the cheapest vintage lenses, a good Pankolar will cost you around about £150, but believe me, it is worth it. It's the king of the vintage 50mm, and I've not yet found one that will topple it from that throne. A really nice combination, one that really worked for me, and one that I recommend you try out if you get the chance. So those are my 12 Christmas picks, the 12 cameras, brackets and lenses of Christmas. So I do hope you've enjoyed that episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful, and I do hope you've enjoyed the year with xenography as well. I'm very excited about what next year's going to bring. I've got loads of ideas about where to take the channel, what to look at, what kind of kit, what kind of equipment I'd like to look at. But if you've got any suggestions, do put them in the comments box below, and I'll do my best to make them for you. Thanks so much to everybody who supported the channel over the year, everybody who's tuned in and watched the videos, everybody who's commented, everybody who's lent or given equipment. Loads and loads of people are very kind and sending equipment for me to use, to try to review, and it just constantly astonishes me how kind people are. So thank you so much to everybody for that. Thanks to all the patrons over on Patreon for their continued support. It's absolutely astonishing the support I've got from there. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for helping the channel this year and for helping us to make some really good progress that I am very, very pleased with. And, I can't tell you how much I'm grateful to you all for that. Have a happy Christmas, everybody, and a happy new year, and enjoy this break in this, what has become a rather tumultuous world of late. That's it from me for now. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the jolly old bell thing before you go. And if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to help it grow, to support it, to help it develop, you can do that over at patreon.com/Zenography, and you can do it for as little as $1 per month. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week and next year for some more Zenography. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next time.